Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Shakespeare and I work at the Australian Federal Police in the Joint Policing Cybercrime Coordination Centre, JPC3 for short, and I'm in the cybercrime prevention team. So our team focuses on protecting the Australian public from cybercrime, partnering with various stakeholders to amplify messaging, and we also have a strong focus on cyber offender prevention. So feel free to come and chat to myself, Claudia and Rachel if you want to hear more about some of the other work we do. But today I'm going to introduce an exciting project that really highlights the importance of collaboration and evidence-based practice in cybercrime prevention. So around the world, there's been significant funding invested in police and government awareness-raising campaigns for cybercrime, but often we don't spend the resources to assess how the public actually responds to these initiatives and whether they are effective. So the Australian Institute of Criminology partnered with the AFP, JPC3, and the eSafety Commission to deliver a series of targeted email messages to members of the Australian public and test whether this can change their online behaviours and attitudes, reduce their risk of cybercrime victimisation and other online harms. Before I jump into the research design, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're all gathered on here today. So for this experiment, we recruited 3,500 participants through AIC's 2023 Australian Cybercrime Survey, which ran in February and March 2023. In this survey, participants answered questions about their experiences of cybercrime victimisation, the harms associated with victimisation, and their engagement in risky and online behaviours. We then, for our experiment, we randomly split participants into one of three conditions. So the first group was an online abuse and harassment intervention, which was run by eSafety. The second group was a profit-motivated cybercrime intervention, which was run by our team at AFP. And the third was a control group. So the two intervention conditions received monthly intervention emails for 6 months, and the control group, of course, did not receive any of these emails. These participants then completed the 2024 Cybercrime Survey, where they were asked the same questions again as in 2023, as well as additional questions about online safety, perceptions of government responses to cybercrime, and their opinions of this trial. So I'll discuss the emails that the AFP developed for this profit-motivated cybercrime prevention messaging component. So we tried to make each email message as engaging as possible, often by tying the topics to current events. Sorry if it's a bit small to read. Our very first email was sent out in October, which is also Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And this first email just outlined what to do if you think you're a victim of cybercrime. Back to basics, how to report on Report Cyber. Our next email focused on online shopping scams and fraud to coincide with November Black Friday sales, as well as the Christmas retail shopping period. And for December, we had a couple of Christmas puns in there, but the main focus of the email was multi-factor authentication. So as you can see in each of these examples, we really tried to make them quite visually appealing, embedded a video in this November one, which actually had about 80 clicks, which was great to see people engaging with the content. So moving on to our other emails, January we had setting up automatic updates as a New Year's resolution. February we discussed romance fraud in the context of Valentine's Day. And our final email message, we wanted to do something so simple yet so important, passwords and passphrases. For each email message, we tried to include a call to action, so a small behaviour change that the recipient can do straight after reading this email. For the passphrases email specifically, we included a link to a New South Wales government online tool which actually tests the strength of your password, this tool down here. And we thought this would be a more interactive way to start the conversation about passphrases rather than just simply suggesting people to change all their passwords right now. And surprisingly, this passphrase email had some of our strongest engagement. With about, of the people who opened this email, around 20% clicked on one of these sort of informational links to find out more. So overall, feedback on the content was overwhelmingly positive. More than half of the emails sent to trial participants were opened, and the vast majority of participants said they read the content at least some of the time. The majority of trial participants said they took action to improve their online safety in response to this information we provided. And encouragingly, about a third shared or forwarded or spoke about this information with someone else. So really, raising the potential for this wider benefit. There were some issues that we really tried to consider for the implementation of these prevention messages. One key one being how to make these emails themselves look less scammy, I guess. That's been an ongoing challenge in some of our prevention work, particularly in victim notification, trying to warn victims while still, giving information. And I am aware of the irony we have about sending a strong message, don't click on random links. And then in our emails, we have some links in there. But I think we tried to really overcome this. We tried to embed videos and be really clear about the content we were sharing. We also considered this concept of sort of cybersecurity fatigue. Is this educational style of messaging actually effective? What really works? What does the evidence say? That's why I think it's so critical that this experimental research is being conducted, as everyone in this room understands cybercrimes not going away anytime soon. And it's also important, one of the other factors we thought about when involved in this project was how does the community perceive the role of the AFP in this cybercrime prevention space? Are we the voice that people trust and will listen to? How we can best protect the community. So myself and the AFP team were honoured to be included in this great project. Huge thanks to the AIC for working with us and inviting us here to talk about the project today. I'll leave my section here, but next you'll hear from Laura, who will discuss eSafety's email designs, and then finally from Bella, who will share the results from this trial. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma, and echoing your gratitude to our wonderful colleagues at AIC and AFP for being involved in such a collaborative process. Folks at eSafety have been so excited about our involvement at this from the very beginning right through to last week when we were looking at the slides again and talking about more learnings that we could develop. Before I dive into the specifics of our involvement in the intervention, I thought I would give just a really brief overview of who eSafety is and how this intervention fits within our operating model. So, we are Australia's national independent regulator for online safety. We lead efforts to combat online harms and protect all Australians. So one of the primary ways we explain our work is often through our 3 Ps model or our 3 pillars model. So they are prevention, protection, and proactive and systemic change. So our protection and proactive and systemic change, I would actually say they might be the 2 better known pillars these days, particularly our protection pillar you'll hear about it most often to do with our reporting schemes. It's really our regulatory and co-regulatory elements under the Online Safety Act. But for the general public, this would have to do with our amazing work of our investigators in our image-based abuse schemes that people can report to, our adult cyber abuse, our child cyberbullying, and our illegal and restricted content schemes. Then in our proactive and systemic change pillar, thanks to the brilliant work of our amazing commissioner, you will often hear her talk about our safety by design approach. And this is starting to get a lot of airtime in the media, including the ways that we really push industry to raise the bar in the work that they're doing. And also, we're seeing it cited in industry and academic reports. But the exciting part about this intervention is that it really focused on our prevention pillar and actually brought together the elements that traditionally sit under prevention for us. And it was a chance to kind of dive deeper into that in a public awareness raising campaign. So the education, awareness raising and research parts of our work that sit under our prevention pillar. What's really interesting here is that traditionally for us, we work in a prevention lens, and our education and awareness raising is really around targeted cohorts. So we have specific programs starting with our early years, which is 1 to 4-year-olds, all the way up to older Australians. We also have particular resources, programs and research that looks at the particular harms to people that might be disproportionately at risk of online harm. So that could be First Nations communities or women and children experiencing tech abuse in family, domestic and sexual violence. So what was really unique, but I am going to admit a bit of a challenge about this intervention for us, was this was about awareness raising to a cross-section of the Australian public. We didn't know who they were, what their demographic or risk profile might be, and we really needed to stay on brand and on message with taking a strengths-based approach, but in this regard to a really kind of broad cohort that we didn't know. So, taking all of that into the design of our messages, we had a bit of a plan initially around the 6 messages, and I'm just really going to give you an overview of these and then dive deep into 2 of them. But as I said, we wanted to kind of take a strengths-based message, despite having a plan of how we thought we wanted these to play out and kind of integrate and ladder up the calls to action across each month. What we actually found was really unique about this is that we were getting real-time data and insights month on month from the open rates and the click-through rates. And not only for our own intervention messages, but also with the AFP. So we were seeing what they were sending, we were seeing their open rates and click-through rates. So we were having monthly discussions and collaborating on these insights, theorising on what we thought was working, what wasn't working, and trying to be as responsive as we could in the content and the format of the next email, to be kind of trying to keep on trend with what we thought was working and testing different things. So actually the 6 evolved quite a bit month on month, and our plan did divert. But I thought I'd give you a really brief overview of where we landed. So we started with an online safety message for eSafety. Intentionally, that was meant to be broad. Then we went to tips to help deal with distressing online content and have a safer online experience. This was actually in reference to a lot of the terrorist and violent extremist content that was in the media cycle, and it was also coinciding with a lot of natural disasters in Australia. So people were being exposed to a lot of harm, and it was sort of about protecting yourself from content you don't want to see. Then leading into Christmas, we had giving and receiving tech gifts this festive season, learn how to make smart and safe choices. Email 4 was keep safe online, learn the slip, slop, slap of the internet. This was leading into Safer Internet Day, which is a global campaign that we really try and promote. Then email 5, which I will dive deeper into, was Don't Just Shake It Off, eSafety's Guide to Dealing with Online Abuse. And then finally, email 6 was one that did stay on plan for us. We wanted this to be a reiteration and a kind of reminder to some of the key calls to action for the participants across the previous emails. So to dive a little bit deeper into email 1, this was where we sort of started out with an online safety message. And I'm not going to lie, I am a huge advocate of strengths-based messaging, but we started to get a little bit worried in month 1 because cybercrime is cool and online safety doesn't feel super catchy in an email intervention. And we were really worried about how broad this was. And with the AFP, we realised that there was quite a lot of setting up we needed to do. We don't have the same sort of brand they have. We're a newer organisation. And even just having to preface what we do, who we are, was a little bit different to the way the AFP were able to really jump straight into quite exciting topics. So you'll see here we kind of take this public messaging approach to our 3 Ps, just highlighting who we are and how we help Australians across education, reporting pathways, and holding industry to account. So then diving all the way through, that was October, going through to February the following year, we knew that we wanted to talk about our reporting schemes in one of our email messages. These tend to be more complex to discuss, and certainly in a call to action or behaviour change sort of experiment, it was going to require a little bit more. So we intentionally left it to email 5, sort of laddering up the calls to action to something a bit more complex. This was a particularly good example of how we usually speak to cohorts that are at risk of a particular harm, though. So we have 4 reporting schemes. We would always give an overview of 4, like mention all 4 of them. But if I was talking to a particular audience, let's say you were all frontline workers in family, domestic and sexual violence, I'd really be honing in on the specificities of image-based abuse and maybe touching on adult cyber abuse like doxing and how that might impact women who are experiencing abuse. To give you an example of how complex just those 2 are, we have particular reporting pathways in terms of what you can report to eSafety and how you can report it. Even though within 48 hours it was removed from our public messaging in the course of developing these. So our kind of regulatory environment is quite agile and we want to manage people's expectations. A lot of our reporting schemes, we suggest people go to the platform first, and then if they don't receive help there, they should come to us. Image-based abuse is different. You can come straight to eSafety, unless you're being blackmailed, like in sexual extortion, and then you should go to the platform. And then if you don't receive help, you can come to us, unless you're a child, and then you need to go to ACE. So that's one scheme. Then we get into our adult cyber abuse scheme. This is a really important scheme because we want to encourage reporting, but the threshold is intentionally high. So we need to manage expectations when we're talking to the public about it. It needs to be specifically targeting an Australian adult. The harm has to be intended to cause serious harm and menacing, harassing, or offensive. So they're just 2 of the particular nuances of 2 of our schemes. So trying to convey 4 schemes in one email while staying topical, and in this case we looped this into the media cycle was reporting on Taylor Swift's deepfake image-based abuse. So that all culminated to our 5th message of don't just shake it off, eSafety's guide to dealing with online abuse. Thankfully, we had a pre-existing video that had been published through the Daily Oz news outlet online, and this talked through some of the reporting pathways. So we had a little bit of help in embedding that in this email. But it also made us realise eSafety has a wealth of brilliant resources. I don't know if you've been on our website. There's so much it's hard to navigate. We also have an incredible marketing and communications team that are always designing new content. But we didn't have anything specifically produced for an email intervention campaign. So that was another point that sort of came out. And if the AIC ever want to do this again, that's something we would maybe trial in the future. So Despite a lot of challenges and a lot of learning along the way, we were thrilled with the engagement results and thrilled to be getting similar results to the AFP, to be honest, because we felt like we were up against this incredible agency. But similarly, we had the majority of participants, 82%, they said they read the content at least some of the time. Feedback, again, was overwhelmingly positive, getting 80 to 95% on markers such as easy to understand, engaging and caught their interest, relevant to them and their circumstances, taught them something new, was helpful. Incredibly, the majority said they took action to improve their online safety in response to the information provided. And much like the AFP's participants, a third shared or spoke about the information with someone else. I think, like Emma nodded to, that is such exciting potential for wider applications of an intervention trial like this. Because this, for us, was a really important kind of brand awareness raising activity, the fact that the eSafety participants had such significant increases compared to the control group around having heard of us and knowing what we do and how we can help was a really important finding for us, and it made us realise that there's something really important happening here. So, before I hand over to Bella, who will dive into all of this fun statistical outcomes in more detail, I just want to really quickly trace some of the lessons learnt and future work for us. The brand awareness and perceptions. This was amazing, and if we hadn't had the benefit of the AFP alongside us, I don't think it would have come out as prominently for us how much work we have to do, but how much can be achieved in terms of raising awareness around who we are and what we can do, and really having an aspirational partner in the AFP and what they were able to do was a really fun part of this project for us. Targeted messages. I think being able to apply some of the behavioural insights we saw to not just behaviour changes, but behaviour changes in particular cohorts or particular types of harm. The brilliant keynote we had earlier where it was sort of noted those links to prevention campaigns around particular harms of sharing or producing child sexual abuse material or viewing it. Like, imagine if we could start to use these sorts of insights around targeting particular cohorts, whether they're at risk of victimisation or perpetrators, and particular types of harm as well. And then finally, strengths-based versus fear appeals. As I said, we were really a little bit worried about, despite being advocates of strengths-based work and knowing that that's an important part of our research and our brand, would it work in this context? And I think the engagement results we got were so promising and so affirming that there is a lot of positive to be gained from strengths-based work. Being able to do more studies on particular strengths-based messaging versus particular fear appeals and where that may or may not work with different cohorts and over longer periods of time with behaviour change. So much exciting future work to be done. So I will leave it at that and hand to the amazing Bella for a deep dive into our outcomes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura and Emma, for the giving us the AFP and eSafety's rundown of their designs for the intervention emails, as well as the engagement results, which I think are really positive. So we also wanted to measure the effects of the intervention trial on cybercrime and online abuse and harassment victimisation, as well as online safety behaviour and harms from cybercrime and online abuse and harassment. So comparing the intervention groups with the control group from 2023 to 2024. Because it's a randomised control trial, we can be confident that the outcomes that we observe are due to the intervention and not because of some extraneous cause. So for each of the outcomes related to victimisation, online safety behaviour and harms, we used a mixed effects logistic regression where we could look at the differences in these outcomes between the groups across the 2 years while controlling for differences between the groups in terms of age, gender, predominantly speaking a non-English language, time spent online, and technology use. Again, this is just to help us be confident that the outcomes are due to the intervention and not any sort of imbalances between the groups. So for each outcome, we're not interested only in whether there was an increase or decrease in a certain outcome for the intervention groups, but also whether that increase or decrease, how that compared to the control group. Cool. So we estimate the average predictive margins, which indicate the average predicted probability of the outcome of interest being observed. So in this case being the victim of cybercrime, profit-motivated cybercrime, or online abuse and harassment. These are adjusted estimates of the prevalence of victimisation, so they're not the actual prevalence of victimisation, which provides an estimated probability for the different groups across the 2 years when all other sort of factors are held constant. So this is why throughout you'll see that the control group results will be slightly different depending on whether they're being compared to eSafety or AFP. So these are the estimates of past year victimisation for the 4 major categories of cybercrime, just the overall estimates, all 3 groups together. Overall, online abuse and harassment and malware significantly decreased from the survey in 2023 to 2024, while identity crime and misuse significantly increased. So this is consistent with our Cybercrime in Australia report for 2024, which Anthony was presenting on yesterday, where we found that online abuse and harassment and malware declined across the 2 years. So when we compared the prevalence of cybercrime victimisation for participants in the eSafety condition with the control group, so this is pre-trial and post-trial, there was no statistically significant differences between the eSafety and control group for the prevalence of victimisation on the 4 types of crime. So that's to say the trial didn't appear to have an impact on these types of cybercrime. And these are the results for the AFP treatment condition with the control group, pre-trial and post-trial. As with eSafety, we didn't find any statistically significant differences between the AFP group and the control group on the prevalence of victimisation for any of the 4 crime types. So these figures show the proportion of respondents who experienced at least one harm from cybercrime in the 12 months prior to the survey. So respondents, when they are a victim of cybercrime, they rate the prevalence and severity of a range of different impacts that they experienced. These range from practical, social, health, financial kind of effects that arise specifically from being a cybercrime victim. So although there was no difference in the likelihood of being a victim between the intervention... Oh, that's something right. So the AFP group was significantly less likely to say they had been negatively impacted as a result of their cybercrime victimisation in the previous 12 months across the 2 years. So in 2023, we asked respondents whether they engage in certain online behaviours, and when they compared this to 2024 for the intervention and control groups. These behaviours include privacy behaviours, so that's things like using a VPN, changing your privacy settings on social media from the default to a more restricted setting, and clearing your browsing history and data and cookies more frequently. And security behaviours, so things like using multi-factor authentication, using a secure password manager, participating in online safety training, and regularly updating your devices. So we created a count for each of these numbers of behaviours for privacy and security. We also have a count of unsafe behaviours, so that's things like accepting friend requests from people you don't know and sharing passwords, that kind of thing. So you can see here that there was an increase in online unsafe online behaviours across the 2 years and a decrease in security behaviours as well. So this is generally not desirable because we want increases in safety behaviours and decreases in unsafe behaviours. And we found no change in privacy behaviours. But when we compared eSafety with the control group, we found that the reduction in the online safety measures was significantly smaller for the eSafety group compared to the control group. and the increase in unsafe online behaviours was also significantly smaller. So this indicates a sort of protective effect of being in the intervention group. Similarly, while there was an increase in unsafe online behaviours and decrease in online safety behaviours for the control group, there was no change in AFP's use of privacy and security behaviours. If anything, they went up very slightly, meaning that the trial ensured that they continued to take steps to stay safe online. AFP also had a smaller increase in unsafe online behaviours compared to the control group. So we also asked participants a range of questions related to online safety behaviour and their perceptions of the government response to cybercrime and online harms. So compared to the control group, this is eSafety, these participants felt more confident that they could help a friend who was experiencing online abuse and harassment and exposure to restricted or harmful content, and that they would know how to report these kind of incidents, and they felt more confident in identifying different types of cybercrime. And they also reported feeling safer online generally. Similarly, compared to the control group, the AFP group also felt more confident in identifying different types of cybercrime. They felt safer online for online abuse, cyberbullying and restricted content, as well as profit-motivated cybercrime. So the treatment groups also had more positive perceptions of the government's response to cybercrime and online harms. For the eSafety group, they were more likely to say they were satisfied with the government's response to both cybercrime and online harms, and that the government is doing more to address online harms than it was 12 months ago. They're also less likely to say they think more needs to be invested in early intervention and prevention initiatives, and that there isn't currently an easy way to report online harms. Similarly, for AFP, they were more likely than the control group to state that the government is doing more to address online harms than it was 12 months ago, and that they're satisfied with the government's response to cybercrime. And they were also less likely to say that more needs to be invested into intervention and prevention initiatives, and more needs to be done to inform users online about how to stay safe. Right, so overall, just to summarise both the implementation and the outcomes, the feedback from participants in both the AFP and eSafety trials was overwhelmingly positive. They read all of the information in the emails, they thought it was easy to understand, helpful, engaging, interesting, and taught them something new. The majority of eSafety and AFP participants took action to improve their online safety in response to what they'd read in the emails, and around a third shared the email or spoke about the information that they read with someone else, which sort of highlights, again, the potential for like a diffusion or spread of benefits beyond just those who were targeted. So this is really positive overall. It can be hard to sort of cut through given the volume of emails that people get every day. And Emma spoke about this, this cybersecurity fatigue, where we're constantly getting messages about online safety and security and become a bit desensitized. So really good overall. It really speaks to the effort and consideration that AFP and eSafety put into the design and delivery of the intervention emails. So things like targeting the emails, tailoring them to sort of the events of the month, whether that be Christmas or Valentine's Day, and having straightforward and achievable calls to action in each of the emails, and having strength-based messages as opposed to using fear-based messages. In addition to respondents in the AFP and eSafety groups taking positive action in response to what they'd read in the emails, we found additional positive impacts when we looked at online safety behaviours for these treatment groups compared to the control groups. So overall, there was an increase in unsafe online behaviours and a decrease in security measures and no change in privacy measures across the whole sample. But when we compared the control to the intervention groups, eSafety and AFP, the increase in unsafe behaviours was much smaller, and the decreases in security behaviours were either much smaller than the control or they increased slightly. So overall, the intervention trial had a protective effect for the AFP and eSafety conditions, And this makes sense, again, as the intervention emails had clear reminders about things like setting up multi-factor authentication, automatic updates, and using passphrases and securing your apps, that kind of thing. So achieving this actual sort of behaviour change can be quite difficult to do in terms of getting someone to not only pay attention to the message, but also change their attitudes and intentions and having that flow on to actual behaviour change. So I think that's quite positive. So we found that the trial had no impact on the likelihood of being a victim of online abuse and harassment and profit-motivated cybercrime. So while the intervention was designed to reduce victimisation, it also makes sense that it raised the awareness of what actually constitutes victimisation. So for example, eSafety had a lot of information about what actually constitutes online abuse and harassment and cyberbullying and image-based abuse. So how to identify when certain behaviours cross that sort of threshold. And similarly, AFP had information on things like tactics and warning signs of romance scams and how to sort of know that you might be a victim in one. So it's likely that this increased the intervention trial participants' awareness of cybercrime and online harms and their ability to identify if they've been a victim. Indeed, both AFP and eSafety were more likely than the control to say that they now felt more confident identifying different types of cybercrime. So even if the messages decreased the actual prevalence of victimisation, it may have increased respondents' ability to recognise when they are victims. So just sort of negating the effects somewhat. So this also speaks to the difficulty of reducing victimisation, as there are many factors that can make someone vulnerable, which vary according to the type of cybercrime and online harm that's being addressed. So while individuals can change their online behaviour, there are other factors that might be outside of a person's control, such as third-party data breaches, or the sort of safeguards and policies that online platforms put in place. So we found reduced harm from cybercrime for the AFP group, and this can just suggest that participants, when they did become a victim of cybercrime, knew how to sort of respond more effectively, which reduced sort of the negative effects that they experienced. So, for example, knowing what action to take to secure their compromised accounts, or knowing where to report and seek help. Finally, the AFP and eSafety groups felt safer online, had more positive perceptions of the government's response to cybercrime and online harms, were more likely to think there was enough investment being made in efforts to prevent cybercrime and online harm, and were more confident that they could identify cybercrime and online harms. In addition, Laura spoke about how the raise in brand awareness for eSafety was really important outcome for the trial for eSafety, so knowing who they are, what they do, and how to access their resources. So that's another really positive effect of the trial, which can reduce online harm and improve online experiences. Cool. So this was the first sort of randomised control trial at the AIC that we've run in collaboration with AFP and eSafety. They've been awesome partners to work with. And I think we all learned quite a lot through designing and implementing this trial. So these are lessons that we're going to take forward as we plan to run more trials in the future that we'll turn our attention to and start designing. So we very much welcome your feedback and comments on this trial and opportunities to discuss what the next kind of trials could look at. So thank you.